or some of the folks that are best in privacy, they're surprisingly hard to find because their culture is in privacy. So what do you recommend, like the discoverability? How do you find these communities who are necessarily underground?
Start again from that. It's talking about like what kind of communities are they after? Just like people who are sharing information about this stuff, sharing advice, that kind of thing.
Just any community that's maybe off the radar that values privacy in general. They tend to be very hard to find, but that doesn't mean they don't exist. And I think that that discoverability is part of the education problem is people don't realize they exist. And I'm curious on how do you connect with these folks? How do you find them so that they can share their knowledge? Because clearly they're doing something right if no one can find them.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I personally got into all of these just by starting small and then growing my network from there. So starting from people like Michael Basil and his amazing podcast that he used to have. And that's how I kind of learned about a lot of this stuff. There are some great channels out there and great platforms that are providing resources for people and are very public. Web3 Privacy Now is one of them, and they just launched, a platform where you can search for different tools and try to find exactly what you're looking for. I think that using those guides that exist online as your jumping off point is a great place to start. A lot of them have built-in forums, so there are YouTube channels out there that have some really great forums. There's I think it's Techlaw has like a privacy wins channel where like people share their privacy wins, which is like a cool thing. We have our communities on Signal, and then we've got another one on SimpleX, which is a public channel people can join. I think identifying the more public ones will then allow you to join groups and participate to find the more nuanced and niche ones. We've had so many spin-off groups since I've started my NBTV members chat. We now have like a preppers group that someone started because we started talking about all of the actual physical privacy stuff, and then we realized maybe it was too focused for this to be in like a general chat. So we've like had spin-off groups come from that. We have like a Graphene install group that we have specifically because so many people are installing Graphene from our videos that having a dedicated Signal group that people can join to ask questions if they want to do the install was tremendously important. And so I think that, yeah, you just start from the very public sites out there that provide these resources, and you can just work your way into the more niche groups from there. I think that right now we're in a good place because we have those publicly accessible guides. That's why I kind of talk about this window of opportunity we have to kind of set up the infrastructure for this underground railroad. I'm not sure this will always be the case, right? If you go to China right now and if you're living there and you're trying to find these same privacy tools, you're going to have a much harder time because they have this firewall up that stops you accessing a lot of this stuff. They have all kinds of like monitoring on every communication platform in the country that is stopping people from proliferating these kinds of tools. That's the kind of situation that we should be very wary is coming our way, which is why we want to get this stuff into as many people's hands as we can now. We want to proliferate these tools now because there may come a time when these public privacy guides no longer exist. Maybe, it's a DNS block that the government has implemented. You already have governments, responding to lawsuits such as, Sony versus Quad9, where they've literally blocked the DNS they sued Quad9 for basically retrieving IP addresses from URLs and DNS queries because they were part of the infrastructure of the internet, but Sony said, well, no, you're giving people IP addresses for like pirating websites and things like that. And they're like, we're just infrastructure. We're not doing anything. Like, we don't even have clients. Sony won the lawsuit. You already have governments around the world literally targeting the infrastructure of the internet. So there may come a time where they decide privacy is too dangerous. Cryptocurrency is too dangerous. All of this stuff is banned. You can no longer resolve URL to an IP address. And we no longer have these public guides. I think that we need to have some pretty robust communities being set up now so people are already in these networks. Because at the end of the day, if someone's already using this decentralized tooling and they know how to use the internet privately, they're going to be fine. The problem is that 99% of the population is not going to be fine. And that's going to be the society we all have to live in as part of. So we want to bring as many people on board as possible right now, get them to learn about this stuff so they know where the resources are, so that when this stuff finally, if it ever gets to a situation where that communication, that sharing of information gets stifled, we still have options. We still have a glimmer of hope to turn things around.